Hello to all my beautiful Leos. I'm genuinely so happy you're here with me today. Lately, I've been feeling such a different energy surrounding Leo, almost like something inside of you is slowly waking back up again. Not loudly, not all at once, but strong enough to make you start seeing your life in a completely different way. And honestly, that's the same energy flowing through this entire reading. There's a part of you that's been exhausted from always having to be the strong one for everyone else. But at the same time, there's also a new version of Leo beginning to rise again. More confident, more clear, and no longer willing to make themselves smaller just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. So today, let's open up this space together for a moment. Take a deep breath and see what spirit may be trying to show you during this season of transformation. And almost the moment I connected with your energy, Leo, the Sun card came through. There's something very different happening inside of you right now. Not the kind of change that arrives loudly and demands everyone's attention all at once. It feels more like the moment early morning light slowly starts slipping through the curtains of a dark room. Soft, quiet, but enough to make everything slowly come back into view again. I feel like there was a period where Leo spent far too long living in survival mode for everyone else. Always being the strong one, always lifting other people up, always walking into the room with a steady smile, even when deep down you were exhausted. And the strange thing is, when someone becomes everyone else's sun for too long, sometimes they forget how to warm themselves. There are nights where you sit quietly in your room after a long day. Your phone is still lighting up nonstop. Messages keep coming in. Life outside keeps moving. But inside, it almost feels like your energy has been pulled in too many different directions for too long. And I think that's why the Strength card appears in this reading. Because the energy of this card was never just about becoming tougher. It's about the moment a person finally begins softening toward themselves, instead of constantly fighting every emotion they carry inside. Leo, I feel like you're stepping into a season where you no longer want to live just to be validated anymore. You don't want to keep proving your worth by doing more, achieving more, or constantly maintaining the perfect image for everyone around you. And lately, it feels like you've started realizing something really important. Your value does not disappear just because someone else fails to recognize it. And honestly, that kind of realization changes a person deeply. Because when a Leo stops searching for light outside of themselves, they usually begin remembering where their real light has been all along. The Ace of Wands card carries the feeling of a spark finally reigniting after a long period of emotional silence inside of you. Not rushed, not chaotic, not impulsive. It feels more like waking up one morning, and for the first time in a very long time, wanting to begin something again for yourself. Maybe it's an idea, a new version of yourself, a dream you abandoned somewhere along the way, or simply the desire to live more honestly with who you really are. I keep seeing the image of someone sitting beside a window late at night, streetlights reflecting softly across a quiet room, and for the first time in a long while, they're no longer afraid of thinking about the future. Not because everything suddenly has answers, but because somewhere inside them, hope has started returning again. The feeling that maybe they can create light in their own life one more time. And honestly, Leo, I think one of the most beautiful things about your energy right now is that you no longer want to shrink yourself just to fit inside other people's expectations. You're starting to want a life that actually feels like yours. To laugh when you genuinely feel happy. To rest when you're truly tired. To move toward the things that make your spirit feel alive again, instead of simply surviving inside old familiar cycles. And I think Spirit is gently trying to remind you of something right now. There's a version of Leo that's been asleep for far too long. But lately, that version of you has slowly started opening its eyes again. And the interesting part is, this may only be the beginning. Because after someone begins finding their light again, there's usually a quiet season that comes right after. Not a sad kind of silence. More like the kind of stillness the soul needs, so it can catch up with everything that's changing inside. And I think that's exactly why the Hermit card comes into this reading. Leo, lately you may be realizing you just don't have the energy for shallow conversations anymore. You don't want to keep showing up in places where you have to force yourself to hold everyone else's mood together. There's a very specific kind of exhaustion that happens when someone has been giving their energy away for too long, without ever emotionally resting. And honestly, I feel like both your body and your mind have been gently trying to pull you back toward yourself, maybe through very small moments. Turning off a few notifications, replying to messages less often, sitting in your car a little longer before walking into the house, or simply wanting to be alone in a quiet room at the end of the night, with slow music playing softly in the background. And that doesn't mean you're disconnecting from the world. I think you're finally beginning to hear your own voice again after living inside too much noise for too long. The Four of Swords card carries the feeling that Spirit is trying to create space for you to breathe again. A very gentle pause in between all the pressure, responsibilities, and emotions you've been carrying for so long. Because sometimes what exhausts a person isn't the work itself. It's the fact that they never truly allowed themselves to rest from always being the strong one. And Leo, I feel like you're slowly relearning that now. You're beginning to understand that resting does not make you weak. Silence does not mean failure. And needing space to heal your mind does not make you selfish. Honestly, there's something very emotionally mature happening inside of you right now. The Queen of Cups card comes through like a softer version of Leo, a deeper version, a far more emotionally aware version than before. You're no longer reacting to everything so quickly, no longer trying to control every outcome. Instead, you're beginning to observe your emotions the same way someone watches rain falling outside their window at midnight without needing to fix it immediately. And honestly, I think your intuition is becoming incredibly strong during this season. Not in a predicting the future kind of way. More like finally being able to see the true energy of people and situations around you. You can feel which places drain you, which people make your heart feel heavy, and what truly still aligns with the person you're becoming. There are things you used to tolerate before, but now, the moment you step into those spaces, your entire body feels tired. And that's not weakness. Leo, that's your soul beginning to reject what no longer resonates with you anymore. I keep seeing the image of someone staying up very late, the room lit only by a small desk lamp, holding a glass with melting ice inside, quietly thinking about their life. No longer thinking, how do I make people see me differently? But instead, what actually makes me feel at peace? And maybe that's the question quietly changing everything inside of you right now. Because when a Leo stops chasing external noise, they usually begin hearing another path calling their name very softly from within. And I think that's the moment when things begin changing for real. Not just inside your thoughts anymore, but in the way you're actually starting to live your life day by day. Lately, I feel like Leo has been getting much more serious about the future. Not in a pressured way. Not like you suddenly need to have everything figured out overnight. It feels more like you simply don't want to keep pouring your energy into things you already know no longer fit who you're becoming. There's something inside of you now that genuinely wants to build a life you can feel proud of. A career, a project, a more grounded version of yourself. Or maybe just a life where you wake up in the morning and no longer feel like you're only surviving your way through another day. And almost the moment that shift happens, the Magician card comes through. I've always felt this card carries a very powerful energy for Leo. Because it's never really about outside luck. It's about the moment someone starts realizing they already carry so much within themselves to create the kind of life they actually want to live. Your skills, your creativity, your presence, your ability to inspire other people, even the experiences you once thought were nothing more than painful wounds you couldn't explain. Somehow, all of it begins connecting together in a very strange but beautiful way. You may have found yourself thinking a lot lately about what you truly want to build over the next few years. You see your life differently now while driving home late at night, or sitting alone, working quietly in your room at 2 a.m. with nothing but the sound of a fan humming softly in the background. I keep seeing the image of someone slowly laying down bricks for their future, even if nobody around them fully sees it yet. And honestly, that's usually the most important stage, because so many beautiful things in life are built quietly, long before the world ever notices them. The Eight of Pentacles card carries this energy of steady devotion, not flashy, not constantly needing attention, just the quiet determination of becoming a little better each day than the person you used to be. And I think Leo is slowly stepping out of that energy of only dreaming for too long. You're beginning to want to actually touch the life you once only imagined from a distance. Maybe you're learning something new, changing the way you work, trying to build your personal brand, wanting to make money doing something you genuinely care about, or simply wanting to create a life that feels more meaningful to your spirit. And honestly, my favorite part about your energy right now is that you're no longer trying to create an image just to impress people. You want depth now. You want success without losing yourself in the process. You want growth, but not at the cost of emotionally exhausting yourself just to prove your worth anymore. And I think that's exactly where the King of Wands card starts showing up very strongly. Not as someone who always needs to be the loudest person in the room, but as the kind of person who can stand quietly and people still feel their confidence and direction without a word being spoken. Leo, you may not fully realize this yet, But I honestly feel like you're entering a season where your energy is becoming far more mature than before, less impulsive, less desperate to be seen, but clearer than ever about what you truly want to build. And sometimes, real maturity doesn't come from how many achievements someone has. It comes from the moment they begin asking themselves, what kind of life actually reflects who I really am? And lately, I feel like that question has been following you everywhere, especially in the quietest moments. Because the more clearly you begin seeing yourself, the harder it becomes to return to the version of you that lived only to keep other people comfortable. And honestly, I think that's why the energy of this reading starts shifting so strongly from here. This is no longer just about healing. It's movement now. It's the feeling that something inside of you is beginning to step outside the life you've stayed in for far too long. The Fool card comes through like the moment a door quietly opens somewhere inside your mind. Not the kind of door that changes everything overnight. More like the first time in a very long time, you finally allow yourself to think, maybe I could live a different kind of life. A lighter life. A wider life. A life that feels more honest to who you really are. And honestly, Leo, I don't think what's making you nervous right now is the future itself. I think it's the realization that you actually have the power to choose the direction of your life. Some people stay too long inside roles that no longer fit their soul. A job that drains them. An environment that constantly makes them shrink themselves. A version of themselves that keeps pretending everything is okay, even when deep down, they're exhausted. But lately, I feel like something inside of you wants to move away from all of that, even if it's only happening quietly inside your thoughts right now. You may not have told anyone yet. You may not have acted on it yet, but internally, something has already started changing direction. I keep seeing the image of someone driving very late at night, empty streets, soft music playing low in the car, and for the first time in a long time, they're no longer afraid of the idea of beginning again. There's still nervousness there, still some uncertainty, still that feeling of standing at the edge of something completely unfamiliar, but at the same time, there's also excitement. The kind you can't fully explain. And that's where the Knight of Wands card begins coming through very strongly. I've always felt this card carries the energy of someone reconnecting with their passion for life again. No longer standing still inside places that slowly made their spirit go cold. Leo, I honestly think there's a fire inside of you beginning to come back to life. Not the kind of fire that burns just to prove something, but the kind that makes you want to keep moving forward, to try again, to discover more of yourself. And maybe the most beautiful part of all of this is that you no longer need everyone else to approve of your choices anymore. That alone may be one of the biggest shifts happening here. Because when someone starts trusting their inner voice more than external noise, they usually begin stepping into an entirely different chapter of life. The Chariot card carries such a strong feeling of movement here, but not chaotic movement. More like someone finally beginning to understand where they want to go, even if they're still learning how to fully trust the road ahead. And I think Leo is slowly realizing something important now. Real confidence does not come from never feeling afraid. It comes from continuing to move forward, even while your heart is still trembling a little. And maybe that's what Spirit has been gently trying to remind you of during this season. You do not need every answer before you're allowed to begin. Sometimes, simply realizing your soul no longer belongs in the old version of your life anymore is already enough for a new journey to start unfolding. And honestly, I feel like this may be the moment your life quietly begins opening toward an entirely different direction. Because once someone has seen a new door opening for them, it becomes very difficult to go back to living the way they used to. And honestly, Leo, I feel like something inside of you is waking up in a very powerful way now. Not the kind of motivation that shows up for a few days and disappears again. This feels deeper than that. It feels like you're finally becoming tired of doubting yourself for so long. There may have been a season where you delayed a lot of things. Not because you were lazy, but because somewhere deep down, you were afraid of what would happen if you gave something your all and still failed. So sometimes, standing still felt safer. At least if you never fully began, you didn't have to face disappointment yet. But honestly, I don't think your heart wants to stay in that space anymore. Lately, I feel like something has been quietly pulling Leo back onto their feet again. Very quietly. Maybe it's waking up one morning and realizing you no longer want to keep repeating the same life patterns anymore. Or maybe it's a very small moment where you catch yourself in the mirror and notice something different in your eyes, less exhausted, less lost. Almost like a part of your energy is slowly returning to your body after being scattered across too many things for far too long, and almost immediately, the Strength card appears once again. But this time, the energy feels completely different. This is no longer silent survival. This feels like someone finally beginning to understand where their real power actually comes from. Leo, I think you've lived through enough to understand that not everyone will recognize your value right away, but that never meant your value disappeared. And when a Leo stops asking the world for permission to be themselves, their energy changes in a very noticeable way. Honestly, I feel like you're stepping into a very powerful season of reclaiming yourself. Not loudly, not aggressively, not needing to prove anything to everyone around you, but simply returning your energy back to where it truly belongs. To yourself, to your life, to the things that genuinely matter to you. The Emperor card comes through here like the image of someone finally rebuilding the foundation of their life in a more grounded and mature way. No longer letting temporary emotions pull them in every direction. No longer allowing other people to decide how they should feel about themselves. I keep seeing the image of someone sitting alone late at night in front of a laptop, a quiet room. Only a few distant streetlights glowing outside the window. But this time, they're not sitting there trying to escape their life anymore. They're actually building it, one small step at a time, one small decision at a time, new habits, new boundaries. And honestly, one of the most beautiful things happening here is that you're beginning to understand that self-respect is a form of power too. Not everyone realizes that. Some people spend their entire lives trying to be liked, while never truly standing beside themselves. But Leo, I think you're finally learning how to do that now. And the Queen of Wands card brings such a naturally magnetic energy toward the end of this reading. Not the kind of attraction that tries too hard to stand out, more like the kind of light that naturally appears when someone is finally living in alignment with their true energy. You may not fully feel all of these changes yet, but honestly, I think people around you have already started noticing it. The way you walk into a room, the way you speak, the way you no longer shrink yourself just to fit into other people's expectations. There's a very different kind of confidence returning to you now. Quieter, more mature, but also far stronger than before. And maybe the most uncomfortable thing for the old version of you is realizing that this new version no longer wants to go back to living the way it used to. Because when someone truly starts moving closer to themselves, they usually begin seeing life through completely different eyes. And honestly, Leo, I feel like you've been changing in far more ways than you probably realize lately. Not just your thoughts, your energy, the way you carry yourself, the way you want to live. Even things that once felt familiar to you, now somehow feel like they no longer fit the same way anymore. And honestly, I think that's a sign you've already outgrown an older version of yourself. The Star card comes through in this reading with such a beautiful feeling around it, Leo. Not the kind of blazing light you used to carry before. This feels softer, deeper, like the sky very late at night finally becoming quiet again after a long, exhausting day. I feel like you're entering a season where you're reconnecting with genuine inspiration again. Maybe through creativity, music, visual art, writing, business, or simply the desire to do something that makes your spirit feel alive again. And the beautiful thing is, this time your energy is no longer coming from wanting to impress people. It's coming from wanting to create a life that actually feels freeing to you. I keep seeing the image of someone staying up very late, opening their laptop, saving dozens of new ideas, changing playlists, rearranging their workspace, searching for inspiration for a completely different version of their life. No longer doing things from the mindset of, I have to do this, but instead, I want to try this. And that's exactly where the Page of Wands card begins showing up more strongly than ever. There's a younger energy returning to you, a more alive energy, a more curious energy. Honestly, I don't think Leo has felt this willing to explore life again in a very long time, to visit new places, to change your style, to try a different career path, to step outside the patterns that kept making you feel emotionally stuck for so long. And maybe my favorite part of this entire energy is that you're no longer afraid of changing anymore. Before, you may have worried that if you became different, people wouldn't recognize you anymore. But lately, I think you're beginning to understand that people cannot grow if they stay trapped inside the same old version of themselves forever. There are things Spirit seems to be gently pulling you toward now, an idea that keeps repeating in your mind, an inspiration that refuses to disappear, a version of yourself that makes your heart feel something strange every time you imagine it. And honestly, I don't think that feeling is random. The Empress card at the end of this section carries such a strong sense of expansion around your personal energy, not just becoming more attractive or more confident externally. This feels like someone truly beginning to bloom from within. You may start taking care of yourself differently, dressing differently, reorganizing your living space, changing your environment, or simply no longer allowing negative energy to stay around you for too long anymore. I keep seeing the image of early morning sunlight finally pouring into a room after days of cloudy weather, while someone slowly opens the window to let fresh air in again. That's the feeling surrounding your energy right now, Leo. A very natural kind of expansion. Not forced, not performed, not something you have to exhaust yourself to become. It's simply that your soul is finally beginning to have enough space to breathe again. And maybe the most beautiful part of all of this is that you no longer want to become the version of yourself other people expected you to be. You're beginning to want to become the version of yourself that makes you feel proud when you look in the mirror at the end of the day. And honestly, I think that's where real transformation finally begins. Not when your outer life suddenly changes overnight, but when something inside of you no longer feels connected to the old version of yourself anymore. And honestly, Leo, I feel like this is where the emotional depth of this reading becomes the strongest. Because some transformations happen very quietly. No one notices them immediately. No one fully understands them from the outside, but the person living through it can feel very clearly that they are no longer the same person they were a few months ago. The death card comes through here without the heavy or frightening feeling people often associate with it. It feels more like an old room slowly being cleared out after years of holding things that no longer belong there anymore. Old beliefs, old fears, older versions of yourself that once tried so hard just to feel accepted. And honestly, I don't think the hardest part for Leo right now is changing. I think it's accepting that you've already outgrown places you once believed would always be home to you. Some relationships feel different now. Certain environments that once felt familiar suddenly feel emotionally suffocating. Even dreams you once held onto so tightly may not move your heart the same way anymore. And I think that can leave a person feeling both sad and strangely disconnected at the same time. Because when you're standing between two versions of yourself, sometimes you honestly don't know where you belong anymore. The old version no longer fits, but the new version is still being formed. I keep seeing the image of someone standing in front of a mirror very late at night, dim lighting filling the room, quietly staring at themselves as if they're trying to understand, who am I becoming? And honestly, Leo, maybe that answer does not need to arrive all at once right now. The Temperance card comes through like a very gentle reminder that you do not need to force yourself to become perfect while you're still healing and growing. You do not need every answer. You do not need to always be strong. You do not need to rush your transformation just to prove you've changed enough. Some of the most beautiful versions of people are created very slowly, very softly, very quietly. The same way the sky changes colors before sunrise. You never really see the exact moment everything shifts. But when you finally look up again, the entire sky is different. And honestly, I think Leo is standing right in the middle of that transition now. A very sacred kind of in-between season where you're slowly learning how to trust yourself a little more every day. Trust your intuition. Trust your emotions. Trust that if your soul keeps pulling you toward a different direction, maybe there's a reason for that. And maybe the most beautiful thing of all is that I don't think you want to return to being the version of yourself that constantly apologized for their own light anymore. The Six of Wands card carries a very different kind of victory at the end of this reading. Not the kind where you have to be better than everyone else, but the kind where you finally begin walking through your life in a way that feels more honest to who you are. Maybe everything outside of you is not perfect yet. There are still exhausting days, moments of doubt, nights where you lie awake overthinking while the entire room sits in darkness. But at the same time, there's also a very calm part of you now that quietly knows you're moving in the right direction. And honestly, Leo, I think maturity is not always about becoming someone completely new. Sometimes, it's simply about finally becoming brave enough to return to who you truly were underneath everything. And honestly, I feel like that may be the journey your soul is walking through right now. A journey that is no longer centered around how other people see you, but around the way you're finally beginning to see yourself. A little softer, a little more honest, and far more gentle with yourself than you used to be. Honestly, I think life doesn't always change through huge cinematic moments the way movies try to portray it. Sometimes it begins much more quietly than that. Sometimes it begins with someone sitting alone in their room very late at night, suddenly realizing their heart no longer wants to keep living the same way anymore. And maybe that's really what this entire reading has been trying to touch. Not the idea that you need to become someone else, but the feeling of slowly returning closer to yourself again. Closer to the version of you that no longer feels the need to exhaust themselves just to be loved. No longer believing you have to do everything perfectly just to feel worthy. and no longer wanting to dim your own light just to keep other people comfortable. Maybe this journey still feels uncertain at times. There will still be days where you feel tired, moments where you wonder if you've drifted too far away from the person you used to be. But honestly, sometimes that feeling is actually a sign that your soul is growing in a very real way. I keep thinking about the image of someone opening their window early in the morning after a very long night, letting fresh air slowly move through a room that's still slightly dark. Nothing changes instantly in that moment, but somehow they know they no longer want to close that window again. And maybe that's the question I want to leave with you today, Leo. If you were no longer afraid of fully being yourself, what do you think the next version of your life would look like? And if you're still here with me at the very end of this reading, thank you truly for sharing a piece of your time and energy with this little space. And if readings like this make you feel understood somewhere deep inside, then maybe you'll want to stay a little longer for the next stories we explore together here. But for now, let yourself rest a little, Leo, because honestly, I think the light you've been searching for may have already been living inside you much longer than you realized.